Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our HealthLinks webinar series. For those of you that don't know, HealthLinks is a signature program at the Center for Health, Work, and Environment at the Colorado School of Public Health, and we collaborate with employers to build a culture of health and safety in the workplace. My name is Michelle Hahn, and I am the Community Programs and Events Manager for HealthLinks and our center. And one of my favorite parts of my job is to work with our partners to put together all of these topics and presentations for you that we're engaging in today. These webinars are really designed to relate back to our HealthLinks benchmarks. We have 6 benchmarks within our HealthLinks standard, and we like to provide more information and resources for you to take back and implement in your workplace to continue to build a culture of health and safety for your employees. Before I switch it off to our presenter today, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items for you. So just to remind everybody, we will be keeping you on mute throughout the duration of the presentation. This will help eliminate any feedback or any technology problems that we may have. So if you have a question throughout the presentation, feel free to use your chat box. That should pop up in your control panel when you logged in today. Just type in your question there and we'll respond throughout, and then we'll save a few minutes at the end of the presentation for any final questions. We are recording this webinar, so we will be happy to share the link for you so that you can watch it again or send to your colleagues who may not be able to join us today. In that same email, we'll also be sending out some handouts and resources and the contact information for our presenter. And there will be a quick quiz for you to, or not a quiz, sorry, we're not testing you on this information. We're just going to ask for your feedback, what you enjoyed about the webinar, what you'd like to see in the future, and how we can continue to provide information that is relevant and useful to you. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker for the day. Kate Pfeiffer is one of the founders of Nutrition Inc., a local corporate wellness company. She earned her business and language degrees from Arizona State and received a Master Nutrition Therapist designation from Denver's Nutrition Therapy Institute. She moved from private practice to the corporate wellness world in order to make a positive difference on a larger scale. Kate frequently develops and teaches various nutrition and lifestyle education classes all over Colorado, and she has been quoted in publications like USA Today and the Denver Post and has appeared on television as a nutrition expert. We're very excited to have Kate joining us today. She has a lot of great information for you to share, and I don't want to keep her from sharing that, so I'm going to pass it on to you. Take it away, Kate.
Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate you having us here, and we think that you do amazing work here at HealthLinks, and yeah, thank you so much. You know, let's dive right in. So many times we do, or we see companies that do biometrics, and they don't really follow it up with much. So that's what today is about. But also, I know a lot of you are employees, so I want to make sure that we also discuss sort of what you can do for yourself to improve or really to support your results. Whether that's working side by side with a doctor, or maybe your numbers are just kind of on the edge and you want to get a hold of them. So that's what today is about. Nutrition Inc., we are a woman-owned, yours truly, Denver area corporate wellness provider. As Michelle mentioned, we do provide services all over Colorado. We have weight loss classes, as you would expect. We also have cooking demonstrations. I just taught one yesterday, for example. We have lots of lifestyle-related education classes, a lot of them that you wouldn't expect, things that really zero in on bone health. We have a new one on microbiome, phytonutrients, how to support healthy cholesterol, how to support brain health, a really pretty extensive catalog that we worked out and that we teach a lot of employers' places. And we certainly are happy to work side by side with other wellness providers. That's not a problem. We do, in terms of just zeroing in on this whole biometric topic, we do provide one-on-one coaching for employees. And so we also provide, based on that, aggregate reporting for the employer. So, for example, you know, we have done employee coaching for 70 employees, and we know that 35% of employees eat 1 extra serving of vegetables now at the end of the coaching program than at the beginning. That kind of statistics, that's really nice to see. So in terms of why get screening and why waste your time with HRAs if you're really not that convinced to get them is, well, if you don't know where you are, it's hard to know where you're going. If you don't know that you have, you get from the HRA, you might find out that you have a lot of smokers, or we were just talking about vaping is the new thing. It seems to be, there is a misconception that it's really not that bad for you. It turns out it sure is. And so you need to know these kinds of things so that you can, of course, provide appropriate programs to support your employees. And so in terms of biometric numbers, most people, most employers will choose to get BMI, body mass index, fasting blood sugar or blood glucose, same thing, blood pressure, triglycerides, and cholesterol. Those tend to be kind of the big ones, and those are what we'll focus on. A lot of the employers will choose to provide some other things and really detailed numbers, and that's not within our scope of services, but we always recommend that if you have questions about your numbers, that you talk to your physician about those. So in terms of kind of assessing where you are or where your pool of employees is, you can look at other data too, like data that you might get from, aggregate data that you might get from your health insurance provider, for example, for claims and such. There was also a presentation recently about needs assessment, and so you might want to listen in on that from HealthLinks. That kind of addresses a little bit of this of gathering more data. And let's say you don't have access to data. So let's say that you are an individual and you don't have access to your biometric numbers for whatever reason, or you just keep putting it off. What can you do in the meantime? Well, you certainly can look at a questionnaire, for example. And so what that would look like, we have one, for example, and we ask people questions about, where is your stress level, for example, on a scale of 1 to 5? Or questions like, do you get shaky, irritable, and lightheaded after you miss a meal? That's a really great question to ask to assess if you tend to have periods of low blood sugar, for example. That would mean that you may need a little help with your blood sugar balancing. And so I know that this seems really obvious, but collecting information on problems is not the same as solving them. And so just because you as an individual go to the doctor and you get these fancy tests done, if you don't follow up on them, they're really not terribly useful. And so, for example, I know that I have been guilty of this. And so, for years, I didn't address a concern that doctors have brought up repeatedly. And it took me quite a few years and a lot of education when I kind of got into the health field to really get an awareness of, yeah, this is a big deal. You can't be walking around with anemia for many years. It will start damaging other things in your life. And maybe your brain is not getting enough oxygen, for example, because your red blood cells can't carry enough oxygen and so forth. This kind of hits home for HR professionals possibly as well, simply because you have to be there at the right time. And so when a person is ready to take steps, or a person is not ready but needs more information in order to be ready to take steps to make changes in their, in their health or their well-being, it's a good idea to have those programs and that information ready to go for them to be able to access it. So for example, I was just at a health fair last week where I was asked if we provide smoking cessation by one of our clients, and we do not. But I was sitting next to at this health fair next to a provider who did, and they were already working together. They just, didn't have that connection to know that they actually have access to smoking cessation. So do check into to this to see what kind of resources you already may have available through maybe some nonprofits or maybe through your insurance company. And again, we always encourage people to talk to their physicians. Any questions that they have, we're here to support, but there are certain things that are really not within our scope of practice. Today, we're really just zeroing in on lifestyle and diet. Here are some resources here, some websites that we really like to use. And if you're an HR professional, these are really great resources as well in order to communicate with your employees on certain important wellness issues as well. For example, the National Institutes of Health just published this. You can see the date, May 8th. Healthy habits can lengthen life. So this would be important information. So it turns out that if you have these certain healthy habits going, then research shows that your life expectancy goes up as compared to those people that don't have these healthy habits. And they go up significantly, 13, 14 years. And so these are not crazy things to do. I mean, look at the 5 factors here in front of you. It says a healthy eating pattern, nothing crazy. And then how about not smoking, getting at least 3.5 hours of moderate to vigorous physical activity each week, drinking only moderate amounts of alcohol, which, by the way, is 1 drink or less for women. Many don't realize that, and 2 drinks or less for men. So do keep that in mind. Above 1 drink a day for women and 2 for men, we do see problems increase in terms of disease risk. And maintaining a healthy body weight. And keep in mind, if you're struggling with one of these aspects, like let's say you already have all of this lined up, but you're struggling with a normal body weight, you still get a lot of benefits out of this. So it's not like all or nothing. So every little change you can make, it can be really, really impactful. And if you're looking at this and you're thinking, shoot, I need to make an appointment with my financial advisor because maybe I'm going to live a little longer than I thought, then just rest assured you're not the first one to have that reaction. Anyhow, so here we are. We're going to zero in really quickly about those, or on those numbers, the BMI, body mass index, fasting blood sugar, blood pressure, triglycerides, and cholesterol. We'll just run through this real quick just to kind of show you what these measurements can really provide, what information they can provide. So body mass index is a calculation based on only 2 measurements. That's it, 2 measurements, a person's height and a person's weight. And so if you are given a BMI calculation, ideally, you can see that the normal body weight would be between 18.5 and 14.9. That's ideal. If your body weight is over that, then you're in the overweight category. Although technically, if you are the person who lifts a lot of weights, who exercises a lot, you may have really high you might have high muscle mass. And because muscle weighs more than fat, your BMI might be higher, but your disease risk may not. And so body composition is really important, but BMI only looks at height and weight. It has nothing to do, and it has no idea about what kind of shape you are in, for example. Okay. Now, also, body mass index does not look at the distribution of where the fat is located in your body. So if you carry the excess weight in your midsection, you're more apple-shaped, then that means that you probably have a higher disease risk because that belly fat does tend to be problematic. And if you carry most of your weight in your thighs or butt, that might be a little aggravating, but it does not seem to increase your disease risk that much. Also, this chart does not apply if you have special situations going, like you might be pregnant, or also the chart is much different for children as well. And now we get to fasting glucose or fasting blood sugar. And this just measures the amount of blood sugar that is present when the person fasted for 12 hours, 8 to 12 hours typically. Which is key because I talked to lots and lots of people who did not fast before their blood draw. And that means that their number is not very useful. So it is absolutely crucial, like if you're, for example, in benefits, that you communicate to your employees to make sure that they do fast. And so fasting means not having anything for 8 to 12 hours, but drinking a good bit of water is really, really important. There is a little bit of a debate over whether you can have black coffee. Some people just have to have that in the morning. which is another discussion altogether. But really, if they're not putting sugar in it, it tends to be okay, though I would argue that it probably does change numbers a slight bit, since it can modify some of our stress hormones. And so also another important thing to notice here is that make sure that if you're getting your measurement done, that you are properly hydrated. For one, it's easier for the person to find your blood vessels, so that you don't have to get poked repeatedly. But also, you're less likely to get faint and dizzy after a blood draw as well. And if you are dehydrated, your fasting glucose will probably be higher, okay? So it can modify some of your numbers. Also, I had a client whose numbers were all over the place, and triglycerides and glucose were really high, and he'd never had that before. He was really young, and he said, well, does it matter that they took my blood sugar, or they took my measurements the morning after I turned 21? And I said, well, what did you do for your 21st birthday? And he said, you know, the usual. And so with that in mind, do make sure that if you consume alcohol, that you don't have any in the past 24 hours, especially not larger amounts, because that can also change your measurements. Now, there is a more sophisticated measurement out there that some employers choose to get, and that is hemoglobin A1C. It's a 3-month kind of average blood sugar level, and it's actually a really, really sophisticated measurement, and does not require fasting, so that's a little bit of a plus there. Blood pressure measures the pressure in your arteries when your heart beats and between heartbeats. It is very significant because that excessive pressure, if your blood pressure is really high, that can damage your blood vessels and your organs. And so it is absolutely crucial that if you do have high blood pressure, that is managed. And so people ask me all the time, which number is more important? Systolic, the first number, tends to be more important as we age, but they both are certainly important. Please keep in mind that when you go into your screening and for the first time ever you get a high blood pressure measurement, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. There's no diagnosis after one measurement. They have to measure you several times for a diagnosis. Also, these measurements below, please keep in mind that has recently been changed, and now high blood pressure is diagnosed at a much lower level, and so that can change. And also, in terms of if we're talking about worksite wellness, kind of the incentive level may change based on that too. But now high blood pressure starts at 130/80 and above that. I often like to advise people when they think that their blood pressure measurement was a fluke, to go, whenever they go to the drugstore or the grocery store, just stick their arm into one of those machines and just kind of get a feel for where their blood pressure is. You know, if they're not willing to go to the doctor to get it checked out and get it taken care of. Let's see. Also, I recently was consulting with a company that has a lot of on-site workers, and they were telling me that they have a blood pressure cuff in the safety office, and so people could go in and just check their blood pressure whenever they please. So that can be a nice resource as well. Now we get to the lipids, or fats in the blood, and one of them is triglycerides. And triglycerides can be high if you're not fasting. And so this is another place where it's really important to fast. And so triglycerides can be high if you consume a lot of alcohol or consume a lot of calories, for example, lots of other reasons as well. And we don't exactly know how, but we do know high triglycerides somehow contributes to hardening of the arteries. And so cholesterol, we talk about good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. A common misnomer, but really what people mean is LDL. We want to keep that generally under 100, and HDL, which people often dub the good cholesterol, needs to be above 40, and for women, even above 50 can be heart protective. And so sometimes they look at a ratio as well, but what really is important to keep in mind here is that we do need cholesterol, and they are important in order for us to make vitamin D, for example, or to make a bunch of hormones, and that your morning eggs probably don't have a whole lot of effect on your diet, on your cholesterol, because dietary cholesterol, now we know, doesn't have a huge effect on blood cholesterol levels. But what does is the function of your liver, for example, and that is often affected by the amount of sugar you consume, for example. And so we're going to be talking about that in a minute. Fiber consumption is also really important here. We'll dive into that. Just give me a sec. So first of all, why do we care about these numbers? Well, we care about them because there is a lot of connections here. Okay, when you have high numbers, those numbers can contribute to the development of some illness and disease. And so this is not even the exhaustive list. It's a good idea, essentially, to know your biometric numbers, is what I'm trying to communicate here. And so let's say you get your numbers and you think, well, I'm going to go into the doctor, and your doctor looks at your numbers and says, you know, maybe we need to do some more testing or whatnot, but, you know, just work on your diet and lifestyle and come back in 3 months. Well, does anybody know what that means? Work on your diet and lifestyle. I see this all the time when people go into their doctor and they leave with that message and they don't have any idea what to do with it. Does that mean I should eat less bread? Does it mean I should maybe stop smoking? Like, okay, I know that that means that. But past that, people usually feel confused by this advice. So that's what my company does. And there's certainly a lot of resources and a lot of other people like myself that can provide some guidance in this area. So this is sort of the brain of our biometrics presentation. We have a full hour we teach on biometrics. This is just a little taster that we're doing today. We're just going to focus in on a few things like sleep and hydration. We're going to talk a little bit about sugar consumption and fiber today, and fruits and vegetables. So that's what we're focusing on today. The full hour biometric presentation that we often teach has this whole thing covered. And so here you can see, let's say you have your fasting blood sugar just came back at 99, which above 100 is high. And so you're thinking, well, maybe I need to do something about this. And you'd be wise to think that simply because once your blood sugar starts to go higher, it doesn't go down on its own. You really need to change some diet and lifestyle factors in order to support those numbers so that they don't go higher. And so you're thinking, well, where should I even start? Well, you can look at this chart and see, well, maybe I do need to sleep a little bit more than the 5 hours I'm sleeping right now. Absolutely, that can be very, very supportive of healthy blood sugars. But let's talk about my favorite topic, which is fruits and vegetables. So here, the Harvard School of Public Health is a fantastic resource, and I use it very, very often. They say a diet rich in vegetables and fruits can lower blood pressure, reduce the risk of heart disease and stroke, prevent some types of cancer, lower risk of eye and digestive problems, and have a positive effect upon blood sugar, which can help keep appetite in check. So if you are thinking, I don't know, I feel like I'm doing so much to lose weight, but I just have crazy cravings, then I don't know, you could look at how many vegetables a day you have, for example. So this is just kind of one area you could focus on. If you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure, did you really focus on, have you tried to really focus on fruits and vegetables? And it is, I argue that it is no coincidence that they word it a diet rich in vegetables and fruits. I would argue vegetables are a whole lot more important for our health than fruits are, so they all contribute, of course. And so every 5 years, we are issued a new set of dietary guidelines for Americans. And in this current one, I mean, really based on your caloric intake, but they recommend roughly, for the average person, 2 cups of fruit and 2.5 cups of vegetables per day. And so, or equivalent meaning 1 cup of spinach is not 1 serving. 2 cups of spinach is a serving. So if you think about leafy greens that are raw, you know, those are volume-wise, you have to kind of calculate for that. So if you are a benefits person right now listening in and you think, yeah, fruits and vegetables, yeah, I hear it all the time. I think my employees know what to do. Well, think again, because if you have an average population, chances are, based on what we know, that about 87 to 90% of them are not getting enough fruits and vegetables. Okay, so there is probably some opportunity for education, whether that's in terms of a cooking class, like I taught people yesterday what to do with beets, for example, these kinds of targeted things that help people step outside of their comfort zone and explore new fruits and vegetables, or somebody talking about why really to focus on those aspects, or for example, Dr. Terry Wall from Iowa, she talks a lot about eating vegetables. You might have heard about her. She's got a book out called The Wall's Protocol. And she's got a really great TED Talk video that when people argue with me about eating vegetables, and there are a lot of them for some reason, I often just tell them, why don't you just watch this TED Talk video? It is entertaining, it's very interesting, and it never fails to make people really focus on vegetables for a couple weeks. So it's really just a kind of a free resource out there if you want to spread the word about it. I really like that TED Talk. I'm sure there are others out there too. If so, do send me an email. I'd love to know a little bit more so that I can refer people. All right, so here also this dietary guidelines for Americans, they have some examples. When I talk to people, they often mention to me, I ask them about what you have for dinner. For some reason, people always talk about corn and green beans and carrots. And not that there's anything wrong with those things, although corn is arguably a grain perhaps. And of course potatoes, but people kind of have an idea that potatoes are not super nutrient dense. But really they forget about all this other stuff that's out there. Kale and bok choy is one of my favorite vegetables. It's so absolutely versatile. Asparagus is in season. Radishes, I love radishes, and right now they're extremely good. So just kind of eating the rainbow and eating a variety of fruits and vegetables that can provide disease preventive potential. Which brings me to my next point, which is fiber. And so we do know, here it is, fiber appears to reduce the risk of developing various conditions, including heart disease, diabetes, and constipation. So this is really, really important, you guys. We are learning so much about the microbiome, for example, that fiber is absolutely important to keep that going, and as such, I would argue contributes to the health of your immune system as well. There is new information now about fiber being important for healthy blood pressure, for example. And part of that is probably because fruits and vegetables contain a lot of potassium, and they help support healthy blood pressure as well. So fiber is kind of one of my favorite topics. Soluble fiber in particular, like found in psyllium husks and flax seeds and chia seeds and oatmeal, for example. These soluble fibers have been shown to be really therapeutic in supporting healthy cholesterol levels because they can bind to cholesterol and carry it out of the body. So where can you find fiber? Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, whole grains all contain fiber. So there's some examples on the right-hand side. Legumes, so lentils and beans, they're always on top of the chart. They're absolutely fantastic with their fiber content. As, by the way, are berries, like raspberries are super high, and avocados are really, really high in fiber as well. Now, it is recommended that people have about 25 to 35 grams of fiber a day, so let's just call it 30. And I always like people doing a little trial where for one day, look at everything that you're having and calculate how much fiber you're having. If whatever you're having doesn't have a label, that's probably good. Why don't you look it up? And, Dr. Google has the answer to that for sure. There's lots of information on what foods have how much fiber. And it can be very, very eye-opening. Do keep in mind that cooking and peeling changes the content. If you are a person who does this little exercise and you come back with, gosh, I barely get to 15 grams of fiber a day, then I would invite you to reconsider some of your habits. Like, do you peel the apples you eat? Because if you do, then maybe you could look at that instead of adding a fiber supplement. So just really look at your diet first and foremost, and then certainly if you feel like you need to supplement with fiber, you could try that if you don't have any health conditions that might be prohibitive of that. If you currently are not having a whole lot of fiber, make sure that you increase your water intake as well when you start slowly to increase your fiber. Otherwise, it can be a little constipating to start eating a bunch of fiber. All right, so let's talk about sugar, which is my other favorite topic. According to the American Heart Association, added sugars have long been cited for contributing to obesity, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol levels. So if some of those numbers come back a little high, a little elevated, or you get your aggregate report as a benefits professional and it shows that your average population maybe needs a little support in this area, maybe doing a little outreach, a little education on sugar can be fantastic. We, for example, teach an hour on sugar, and we talk to people about how to read labels and look for those sources of sugar and what to look out for. So for example, we know that the average American consumes 31 teaspoons of sugar a day, which is about 124 grams. And so if this sounds like a whole lot of math, just remember that most of the sugar content, actually all the sugar content on labels will be listed in grams. So why don't you just forget about teaspoons and look at grams. And we know that based on the World Health Organization's guidelines and the American Heart Association guidelines, roughly based on caloric intake and body size, we should be having no more than 24 to 36 grams of fiber a day. 1 teaspoon is 4 grams, if you must know. And so this is a really great exercise to do as well, just like with fiber. For 1 day, for 2 days, look at how much sugar you're having. If you measure your sugar intake and you're like, holy cow, I'm having 200 grams of sugar, which does happen, especially for soda drinkers, don't despair. Just start cutting down a little bit. Every little bit helps in order to mitigate some of the risk from it, okay? So just cut your sugar intake by 25%, by 50%, whatever you can do. And so, you know, one of the reasons, I mean, sure, sugar, cutting down on your sugar intake helps with those numbers we mentioned. But also, we do know that people who cut down on their sugar, they often will see their cravings be a little bit more manageable. The more sugar you have, the more you will crave. And I'm sure most of you would agree with this. So when we get in that cycle around the holidays, for example, of having lots of cookies, it's kind of hard to get out of that. And there's good reason for that, physiological reason behind that. People sleep better generally. They may have better mood, not initially probably. So when we drastically reduce the sugar intake for someone who has a lot, they do get a little cranky for a few days. But that often passes. About 4 or 5 days later, they can start seeing benefits. All right, so where, you know, if you have a population of employees, where should your education really focus? Well, there's still a lot of people that drink sugar-sweetened beverages. Even here in Colorado, there are lots of people. So, for example, I had recently a client who proudly exclaimed that since getting their biometrics, he completely cut out soda. That's great, but he happened to replace that with lemonade. And so, unfortunately, lemonade contains about the same amount of sugar content as soda, or it can. And so, you know, maybe there's a little bit of education that needs to happen there in reading those labels to really be aware of, you know, how much your energy drink may have in there, or sports drinks, or if you drink fruit juice in the morning, that can contain a good bit of sugar. If you sweeten coffee, that can contain a good bit of sugar. So, you know, simple things like how much sugar are you putting in your coffee? So I don't know if any of you are fans of the movie Office Space, but one of the characters there, Michael, is shown at the diner where they always go, at the restaurant, talking, very animated as usual, and he's putting packets of sugar in his coffee. And once we counted how many packets of sugar he puts in there, we stopped counting at 8, and that's just when the camera was looking at him. So if he's having 8 packets of sugar, each packet is about 4 grams typically, of sugar in 1 cup of coffee, and then how many refills does he get? So I would argue that he, with each coffee round, he probably got a few sodas, which would perhaps account for all the crazy anxiety that he was showing in his character. But anyhow, and then of course, desserts do count for some, but it's interesting to note that those drinks can really add up as well. So people ask me all the time about fruit. Fruit is fine. Fruit is healthy. Fresh fruit is fantastic. We should all be having 1 or 2 servings a day. The dietary guidelines for Americans, of course, call for about 2 a day. There are some fruits that contain a lot more sugar than others, like grapes and bananas and pineapples. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, don't just have grapes all day. They certainly do add up. But do know that fruit juice and dried fruit are sources of what we call concentrated sugars. So that you should be counting that as added sugars, okay? So maybe not a whole box of raisins, maybe just a little bit mixed in with the nuts and seeds you're having, for example. And if you're having orange juice in the morning, maybe just have a smaller glass of it. And so how do you know something is sugar? All of these contain sugar. And I always like to pick on fruit yogurt, you guys. Up there in the right corner, you can see it listed. Because fruit yogurt often contains tons of added sugar. If it's plain yogurt, it doesn't. Plain yogurt will just have some, like 6 or 7 grams of sugar per serving in there. And that's from the lactose, the milk sugar in there, that then gets fermented. But every additional gram of sugar above that is going to be added sugars. And some of them will have like 36 grams of sugar. That's got crazy amounts of sugar in there. So I always like people reading those labels, of course. If you just get plain yogurt and you put a little bit of fruit on top of it, maybe add some raspberries or something like that, more power to you. If you must, you can maybe drizzle a little honey. You're never going to add that much unless you really go crazy with that honey. But just know honey is also a source of sugar. And then here's this whole label reading business. We are in transition. By next year, there should be new labels. You might see these new labels already. And of course, if you're in the field of wellness, you're already well aware of this. What's changing really here is that in terms of, there are a few things changing, but what's relevant to our conversation here is there's going to be added sugars that will be listed separately. Under total carbohydrate, you could see dietary fiber, total sugars, and then 10 grams of added sugars there, for example, on this label. All right, let's talk about sleep. I love talking about sleep.
Do we have a quick question on the sugar side? So how do you address the issue of artificially sweetened beverages? So how do you go about kind of, I think it's more on the education. So how do you convince somebody that the Gatorade and water that has additional flavors and sweetening is still just as bad as soda? What are some tips to kind of the education side of?
So there are a lot of resources available and a lot of research available that are now showing that artificial sweeteners are not a whole lot better. And that they, actually the most recent information that some of you might have seen in press releases, that actually artificial sweeteners can do a real number on your microbiome, on the bacteria in your gut, for example. That has a lot to do with your immune system, and then now we're learning about your brain and your blood pressure and a bunch of other things. And so it's not ideal. So I do like to address that a lot. But in terms of, was that your question? Your question was a little different than artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, just helping educate that artificial sweeteners are just as bad as having too much sugar. And
well, but in a slightly different kind of way, but also not ideal. And when you have sweet things, then you're fostering that kind of sense and taste for sweetness. So ideally, I prefer that people just don't even go there. I always prefer that people don't put anything in their coffee. If you have to have coffee, maybe have it black. Those bitter flavors and sour flavors. In this country, we spend a lot of time, or a lot of kind of, how should I say this? We like salty, fatty, and sugary. Like, what about sour flavors? What about bitter flavors? Don't really think about these flavors. And really healthy foods oftentimes come with those flavors. And so maybe kind of getting away from fostering that sense of sweetness so that you don't always feel like you have to add something to make it sweet or make it salty or make it fatty and so forth. All right, so I love talking about sleep. I have trained first responders and shift workers in sleep. It is such a simple thing to do and so unbelievably great for your health to increase your sleep to about 7 to 8 hours a night. And it is a great strategy also to support healthy weight loss. How cool is that? You don't have to worry about dieting. You could just sleep more. And that alone can actually have real great positive effects. And then if you think about it, when you're sleep deprived, what foods do you really crave? When you sleep 4 hours a night, or that night, because, I don't know, your dog kept jumping on you that night, and let me tell you, pets do a real number on our sleep sometimes. But the next morning, are you thinking, well, sheesh, I'm really craving a little wild salmon and asparagus today for lunch? No, you're going to be attacking the vending machine, and you're going to think donuts, and you're going to think all these foods that maybe aren't so ideal for your health. And so even from that area, it really is important. All right, let's move on here. Okay, so just some quick things that you can do. So this is kind of an important and complicated topic, but I was trying to distill my whole 1 hour presentation on sleep in the 2 slides here. So there's a thing called circadian rhythm. You might be familiar with that. And that just says, we evolved with the sun. We know when it's out, we know when it's night, and our body functions changed based on that. So we do intrinsically get tired at night when the sun's down. And so because of the way we evolved, the light conditions really are very important in terms of determining when you might feel sleepy and when you should be sleeping. And so if you are trying to get sleepy at night, avoiding electronic devices that often emit a blue light is a really great strategy, for example, or just dimming the lights in your house, for example, or making sure. I just got a new alarm clock, and for my birthday, I was very, very specific. I want somebody else to do the research on this because I wanted an alarm clock that does not have any light on it unless I want it to light up, and I wanted a huge button on it so that I could find it. So anyhow, these little blue light sources can certainly make a difference in the production of your sleep hormones. And so some of the devices now come with settings where there's nighttime settings where the screen becomes more orange, like a fire at night, for example. If you were camping, those nighttime reds and oranges and sunset orange, for example, those prompt the body to issue sleep hormones. Melatonin, you probably have heard about. And so with the light, you can definitely change your sleep hormone levels. You don't have to take melatonin in a supplement form. You can just turn down the light. Or temperature is another big thing here. So for example, it is common knowledge that taking a nice warm bath before bedtime can relax you, help you go to sleep. But it's actually not the warmth of the bath. It's the subsequent drop in temperature once you get out of the bath that stimulates the release of melatonin. Because if you think about it, when we were cavemen, the temperature drops at night. And so this is another signal for our bodies to get tired. And then also know that caffeine generally stays in the body for 8 to 12 hours. So maybe not having it after lunchtime is a really good way to go about it. Some of us can have coffee and go straight to sleep, and that's fine. But if you are the person who has trouble going to sleep and you're pounding the iced tea, for example, in the afternoon, then really question that, whether that's a good idea for you. Alcohol can absolutely do a number on your sleep cycles. In fact, it really changes the way that we sleep, not necessarily the amount. It causes a real disturbance in the second half of the night sleep cycle. And so you oftentimes won't be rested very well, or if you sleep alcohol at night, you'll find yourself wide awake at 2, 3 o'clock, for example, or get really hot, which can also interfere with sleep. So altogether, a nightcap might not be a really good sleep strategy. And nicotine is very stimulating as well. And so that can have an effect on sleep quality and quantity as well. We're nearing the end here. So drinking enough water is fantastically important, as I've already hinted at it. It really just can clean out gunk out of your body. And so it can be a really nice disease preventive tip. So there's a big study that's being done, and a lot of different organizations are doing an analysis of that information. And it is about losing weight and keeping the weight off, and the healthy habits of people who keep that weight off. And one of them on there is sleep, and the other is drinking enough water. So it absolutely can be tremendously impactful. And so if you think about it, what are the signs of dehydration? You know, people say thirsty. Yeah, sure, you might feel thirsty, but it's one of the signs is feeling tired. So if you're a benefits person and you are under some pressure to maybe increase the health of your or help increase the health of your employees, you know, one of the outreach areas could be drinking more water. And how great would it be if suddenly your employees would be a whole lot more awake than before? There could be increased productivity and so forth. And so there are actually some studies that kind of are geared toward this information. And another thing is headaches. One of the primary things I see with headaches is people don't drink enough water. And so next time somebody complains to you that they have a headache, just ask them if they're properly hydrated. And did they get enough rest the night before is also an important question. But certainly this is a big quality of life thing, just drinking enough water. And so what could a workplace provide for success for employees? Well, there's a huge list out there, and there's lots and lots of resources. And so there was recently a presentation here with Health Links that was building a healthy food culture. That could be a great resource. There was also a huge list when I watched that other presentation on needs assessment, for example, through Health Links. And so we're not going to kind of dive into all of them. But one of the things I wanted to mention is a couple weeks ago, I was at one of my client companies' snack rooms or lunch rooms. And I was so very impressed because they had lemons on a cutting board. So you could just help yourself to some lemon water, for example. And they had balsamic vinegar and extra virgin olive oil, so that you could put that on your salad. Like, these are some really simple things you can do. Commercial salad dressings can be really horrendous for your health, containing lots of unhealthy oils and lots of additives, and sometimes artificial sugars and things like that. And so these are just some simple things that you could do so that people would kind of go that extra mile and have those healthy fats for lunch as opposed to unhealthy fats, for example. You could certainly have some classes. You could do challenges. We always provide a challenge with our classes after every class, for example. Cooking demonstrations are a super fun way to engage kind of a new crowd of people that maybe wouldn't show up if there wasn't food involved. You all know that from experience that this is a big draw. And having a library of health books. I was recently at a work site that had a library of health books that you could kind of check out and you know, take it home. And people complain all the time that they don't have ideas on what to cook, or they're in a rut for cooking. Well, providing some of those can be really a nice low-cost option for people as well. I recently worked with an employer where the employees were complaining that they didn't get enough breaks in order to go use the restroom, so they wouldn't want to increase their water intake, for example. So providing these things is kind of getting some kind of hurdles out of the way is a really good way to go about it. And then make sure that you check the already existing resources that you have, because some companies that you're already dealing with may provide some of these resources, and sometimes not at a really big cost either. All right, so this is my last slide here today. And I like to leave people with these thoughts, or with this thought, are these factors within your control? Is getting enough sleep, drinking water, maybe eating less sodium, less salt, and having more potassium or fruits and vegetables, is this within your control? Is figuring out your vitamin D levels and maybe balancing that with the help of a physician, is that within your control? Is eating less sugar within your control? Eating more fiber, exercising more is a huge one. You know, are these things within your control? And chances are that they are well within your control. And so if you feel like this list is absolutely overwhelming, just focus on one or two for the next couple weeks, and see if you notice any change in your energy levels or your sleep, or how you feel altogether. And that's all I have for you today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kate. That was a lot of great information that you provided and some wonderful resources. And just a reminder, we will share the slides so you can get access to the resources and look at this information again. But if you have any specific questions that you would like to ask right now, please feel free to type them in, and we can answer those for you before we let Kate go today. Doesn't look like we'll wait just a few minutes. I think what was helpful for me, I was telling Kate before we got started that oftentimes I'll sign up for our free health screenings and get the numbers back, and always have to remind myself that even if I am in a healthy range, that I want to stay in that healthy range next time. So even keeping this information in mind and making sure that I'm following these guidelines and implementing them in my own workplace and in my individual healthy habits, that then next time I can be confident going back and getting a screening, that hopefully the numbers won't change, or even just knowing what the numbers should be and what they actually affect in your body is always a good reminder.
And you make an important point. You know, it's sometimes a good idea to check in if you start making changes and you're kind of wondering that, well, maybe this is not making that much of a difference. It takes about 3 months for your blood results to change, for example. So checking up on it can be a really nice strategy.
Yeah. We do have a question. Do you have any examples or recommendations of what you've seen in workplaces to provide employees incentives for taking a health risk assessment? I think some people are afraid to go forward and take them, or getting them engaged to participate can be difficult. So what have you seen as creative ways to get employees to take action?
Okay, well, a lot of the incentives can be tied into paying for health insurance premiums. In my experience, while this can be kind of a hairy kind of area, I do feel like that's a place where people, you know, if it hits them in the wallet, they do tend to take a lot more action. I have some client companies where they offer health coaching, and so an employee can just call us up and make an appointment, and the company will pay for that. And I think that's brilliant, except hardly anyone ever calls unless they're prompted in some way for some reason, or they, you know, it just happens to be there at the time that their doctor has a serious discussion with them about their diabetes risk, for example. And then that's a good idea. But generally, you're right. I think that oftentimes there's a little push that's needed. Michelle, from your kind of extensive experience in this, what have you seen be successful?
I think most often in terms of incentives, promoting HRAs gives a lot of people that we work with use a point system so that it's not just targeted towards one area of change, you know, physical activity or nutrition. They try to encourage their employees to take action in every area, and especially ones that are most meaningful to them, but they will add additional points for going to see your healthcare provider and getting those screenings done or taking a health risk assessment. And then obviously if you have more points, then that puts you in the running for bigger incentives. So not necessarily incentivizing just the HRA, but the program, having it be a part of a program as a whole.
And what's nice about this kind of point system is that as an employee, you know, if you have no desire on changing your eating habits, you absolutely will not do it, then, you know, you're left with now a few other options that you can do. So you kind of have to do them. You have to work on, you know, exercising or whatnot,
right?
In order to get to that incentive level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I know there are still a few people on here, and if they have other ways that you're incentivizing your employees to participate in HRAs and get their biometric screening, feel free to type it in the chat and give some other recommendations. All right. I don't see any other questions or comments coming in. Thank you all again for taking your time to sit with us over your probably lunch hour. We really appreciate you participating and joining us for these webinars, and hope the information was very valuable to you and that you can take away something to make a change in your workplace or in your own individual healthy habits. And Kate, thank you again so much for taking your time. It's great to partner with you. You guys are doing some great work, and I know that you work a lot with the companies that we work with too. So make sure that you take a look at Kate's resources, and she also is letting me know that she has a list of upcoming events and classes and things that people are able to participate in if you have an interest of taking a deeper dive in these specific topics. So her contact information will be in the follow-up email, and we can let you know where that event calendar is hosted as well, so that you can get more information. We're going to go ahead and let everybody go. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much.